Hello. All right, so I just put in some made up numbers here, and I just want to figure out what we're dealing with a demand schedule here as we get more specific. Now, so this is just a made up one. You think about this as any market. We could talk about the market for canned tomatoes. And here's the way to think about this. So it turns out that individuals are choosing according to their expected marginal benefit and their expected marginal cost. And we can reasonably assume, unless they're insane or absolutely an idiot, when the benefit is less than the cost, they're going to stop doing it. So let's see if we can use a demand schedule here to say something about this benefit. So can we say anything about the benefit of the first unit here? Well, we know that the benefit of that first unit, unit number 1, right? When the cost is 5, do people consume that unit? They do, which tells us that the benefit of the first unit must be greater than or equal to 5. If it wasn't, they would not consume item number 1 when the cost was 5. Now, can we say anything more? That's about all we can say about that, but that's already something useful. I may not know anything about canned tomatoes. I may hate canned tomatoes. I might be from another planet and not know what a can is. But I could still, by observing people's behavior, by observing what they are willing to sacrifice, I would be able to say, they must be getting at least 5 of benefit out of this. Can we say anything about the second can of tomatoes? Well, it turns out we can. We can already say something. We know that that benefit must be less than 5. How do we know that? Because if the benefit was 5, at a cost of 5, people would be consuming 2 cans, not just one can. So we were able to observe, by observing people's behavior, we're able to deduce and figure out that the benefit of the second can of tomato has to be less than 5, given this demand schedule. What else can we say? It turns out that people consume the second can when the cost is 4. Do they consume 2 cans when the cost is 4? They do. They consume the second can and the first can, which means we can figure out that the benefit of the second can has to be greater than or equal to 4. Same thing here. The benefit of the third can has to be less than 4, because otherwise, at a cost of 4, people would be consuming 3 cans, not 2 cans. And we can also then say that the benefit of the third can must be greater than 3. And the benefit of the fourth, by the same logic, has to be less than 3 and greater than or equal to 2. And the benefit of the fifth can has to be less than 2 and greater than or equal to 1. Again, this is definitely not something to memorize, the numbers, because the numbers are going to be irrelevant to us. But the key is that from this, we can figure out that what is a demand schedule? Demand schedule gives us all of the marginal benefits. It is a marginal benefit schedule, right? The benefit of the first unit, the benefit of the second, the benefit of the third, the benefit of the fourth. That's what we mean by marginal benefit, the benefit of each unit. So it turns out here that based on our understanding of people's choice, point number 3, all of economics in 4 points, we know that a demand schedule tells us marginal benefit. Now, here would be the question, what's the total benefit of 3 cans? Well, what we can do is just add those up. So we know that the benefit of the third can is that much. And again, there's some fancy things. You'll notice these little triangles. I'll talk about that in just a second. Well, actually, I'll talk about it now. Basically, we could chop up cans into smaller portions, and we would be able to figure out that this would be the benefit of the 2.1 can, and the 2.2, and the 2.3, etc. And we'd be able to get rid of those triangles. Or you could think about dealing with so many units here that the triangles become irrelevant. In in graduate level, maybe you'd use calculus here, maybe in undergraduate at some schools. It doesn't help us conceptually at all to use calculus or fancy techniques, but it makes the math work more easily. But for our purposes here, right, we want the total benefit of 3 cans. We could take the benefit of the third, add in the benefit of the second, and the benefit of the first. And that would be, right, at the limit, we could think of it this way. Now, again, I'm encouraging you not to memorize areas, but to think in terms of, right, if instead of this being 3, it was 300, right? Then we'd have the benefit of the 300th, the 299, 298, 297, 296, 295, and so on. We could shade in all of that there, and that area there would be the total benefit. Now, if the quantity consumed, then we could say, well, what if instead of people consuming 300, they consumed this many? Well, then the total benefit would be all of this as well, right? This is going to be important. This is foundational here. So this is the beginnings of what we're going to call comparative statics. That's not particularly relevant, but this will allow us to talk about whether we are better or worse off as a society as a result of something happening. Now, we wanted to figure out what's the net benefit. So this whole thing is the total benefit. What's the net benefit? Well, we would be able to figure out that if people are consuming this many cans of tomatoes, this, whatever this, right, we can get rid of the numbers now. If people are consuming this many cans here, this is our quantity, then this must be our cost, right? Because if the cost was higher, people would be consuming less than this. If the cost was lower, people would be consuming more than this. So this has to be the cost. By observing that people, that's another nice thing, by observing the quantity that people are consuming, we could figure out what the cost must be. Another way we could think about this is if we know the cost, we can figure out the quantity. So this gets really messy, and so this will be the beginnings of what you'll see me do a fair bit, is rather than shading this in, I'm mentally shading it in, but I'll just put some letters in here. And these letters just represent areas. I'll put W in instead, right? These just represent an area. So when consumers are getting this quantity here, their total benefit is benefit, 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 shade all of that in. We're left with the area in which A and B reside. What's their total cost? Well, we know this is their cost per unit, right? So the cost of first, cost of second, cost, cost, cost. So that's their total cost, meaning that their net benefit, their benefit in excess of their cost, or net benefit is just total benefit minus total cost, is A. So in this situation, this is what we would call consumer surplus, or the net benefit to consumers. That's consumer surplus. Not just a fancy term. We'll end up bringing in some others here, but it's just the net benefit. Now, this may look scary, but let's think about this. If we chop this up in a bunch of different ways here, and we said that consumers are getting this quantity here, right? So now we've got a bunch of letters in here. Now, what's their total benefit? Wait, it's the same thing, isn't it? Because we can just add up the benefit of each unit. So mentally, what I do is shade this in. I say that's the benefit, and that's the benefit, and benefit, benefit, benefit. And then I can look and see what letters happen to be in there. And so in this situation, we have A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, and J. K is not in there because K is the benefit consumers would be getting if they were consuming these additional units, but they're not consuming those, so that's not part of their benefit. Their total cost, we've got cost, 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 mentally shading that in. And by the way, if you want to practice by shading it in, you're welcome to, but you're going to need to get to a point where you can mentally shade it in and see the area and then figure out what letters happen to be in there. F, G, H, and I. We've got an F, we've got a G, we have an H, we have an I. What we're left with is A, B, C, D, E, and J. That is consumer surplus. Now, it looked a lot scarier because there's a lot more letters, but it turns out it's no more complicated. There's no more brain power involved. So you need to understand the foundations of why we know that a demand schedule is a marginal benefit schedule and what that actually tells us, and then be able to think in terms of their total benefit, their total cost, and then get to the point where you can reliably figure out what consumer surplus or the net benefit to consumers is. Now, one last thing here is, I mentioned that you can think about the dots moving left and right, or the dots moving up and down. And in this case, now that we know that the demand schedule tells us marginal benefit, which means the benefit of each unit, we know that if I expect to get more benefit out of this, what's happened? What happens to this dot? The benefit of that unit must be higher, right? And the benefit of this unit goes up. That would give us a new demand schedule, right? So that's the beginnings of comparative statics and another way of looking at demand here and moving the dots.